Hello there, it's Steve here in Sydney. I'll be laying Gnosis website at truebluehealer.com, where in just 20 minutes you can get physical evidence of your divine spark activation, which is not just an urban myth. It's not a new age myth to be sniggered at. It's the real you that you're supposed to be. Now, you can get physical evidence of your own awakening, and you can end up with vivid messaging dreams in just a few days, an internal mentoring voice, and Kundalini rise thrown in. The whole thing's for free. So it's a pretty good package, isn't it, for nothing? And it's okay if you don't want to do it now, but it's well worth looking up at truebluehealer.com. Hope to see you there, and all your questions will be answered. Okay? Can I just give you an update, a heads up on what's going on in the stiffening immigration debate in Australia? The Minister, Mr Dutton, has been pilloried again in Parliament by the Marxists, but at least he's getting his point across to them. A major inroad was made into Marxist obstructionism when Mr Dutton was explaining huge mistakes made by the Fraser government in the 70s, letting people come in unvetted, which is the phrase that Donald Trump's been using, that people migrating from other countries into America should be more seriously vetted, you see. So Mr Dutton is using this phrase and using this sentiment. He's got a little bit more backbone than he had a year ago, you see, thanks to Donald Trump. And I would imagine it's going right around the world. But in our parliament, he's got some figures. And what he's doing is what Marxists hate the most. He's beating them around the head with reality. That's what they all need, and they don't like it at all. In fact, what he's been talking about is that of 33 jihadi attacks, terrorist attacks in Australia, 22 of them are done by Lebanese Muslims. And I'll put in brackets, that's from one small area in northern Lebanon. And it's kind of obvious that this has been sheeted back to, it's the children and the grandchildren of the people who came from that one area of Lebanon in the 1970s. And they were all allowed to come fully arms open en masse without being vetted, basically. And there were warnings by academics at the time. Reports on all the interviews indicated they were terrorists, drug dealers, mentally ill, criminally insane people. And but we had to do our virtue signalling. All the lefties did that. All the greenies were doing it. Oh, we take them all, take them out of the terrible trauma of the war in their homeland, and we'll give them a great place to live, Australia. Well, turns out the people who did the first trip, the migrants, were okay, but their children and grandchildren are producing an annual crops of jihadis. It's predictable now. We can estimate every 9 months another 50 jihadis are being produced. So we have an ever-growing gene pool of jihadis, you see. Now, the minister's bringing this up, and he's really rubbing it in the faces of the Marxists, you see. Now, what do you suppose the Marxists are saying back to him, the Greens? What are they saying back to the Minister, Mr Dutton, for rubbing these facts in their faces and trying to get them to face reality? Well, one of the Green leaders said to Mr Dutton in Parliament yesterday, and this is greeted with some mirth, that though the facts the minister is putting out in Parliament are beyond dispute, they're indisputable, they're incontrovertible, it's not proper to talk about them because it's counterproductive. It's counterproductive to discuss reality in the Australian Parliament, because they prefer to drag everyone into their alternative universe, a virtual universe disconnected from reality, where everything is twisted with a political slant to give them some opportunity to call people racist, homophobe, xenophobe, whatever you say. So all they ever want to do really is head kick and name call people with about a dozen Marxist expletives, and discussing facts and reality doesn't afford that opportunity. So that really is crystallisation of the leftist attitude. I must say the leader of the Greens, Dr. Richard Di Natale, called the minister a racist straight away to a camera somewhere. And but Mr Dutton is pressing on, and newspapers are basically taking his side as a welcome display of common sense and growing a backbone. It's been said 2 days in a row in newspapers, and it's damn well good to see. So I just thought I'd give you a heads up on that, and I'm hoping that attitudes harden like this all around the Western world. I'm sure as the body count and the crime rate, the rape count goes up in Europe, sooner or later, common sense politicians have got to get a hearing and put the Marxists in their place for living in this alternate reality. So, that's an immigration subject which is likely to become a global thing as time goes on with Donald Trump in office. Leading by example is what he does. That's very good to see. Instead of arguing by debate, he leads by example. He's making differences now, and unwanted Mexicans are leaving America, going back over the border. How about that? How about that? So, sensing the common sense approach of the US government now being signalled, Mexicans are lowering their inflow into the United States. So can you just see, we can all see, a common sense attitude has an effect on people globally. Okay, that's that subject just for now. A common thing we can do, you can do it inside a company, you can throw up an idea, start a rumour through the company and see who stands up, who criticises it, and who salutes, who admires it, you see. You do the same with websites. You can put a website up with a certain philosophy, political idea in it, and you see what sort of people lob in to have a look at it and then keep coming back. Straight away you're identifying their political biases, their political positions. Now, this also happens with world events, such as the surprise death of Fidel Castro the other day, when it was revealed that this ruthless communist dictator, who killed hundreds of thousands of his own people, purely for the sake of being in charge and having everyone agree with him, and no one's allowed to disagree with Fidel Castro, even his own sister left Cuba and went to America, migrated, right? About the only thing he ever did was allow people to leave to go to America, and several million people did leave Cuba to leave his Marxist paradise behind. Modern day street people tell you graphic stories about it. Modern day Cuba, where they never did get and just don't have any public transport. There is no infrastructure there. And the painful stories they learned years ago that if you give people free water, they should be grateful, but no, they're not. They're uncaring because they don't have to pay for it. So they'll leave a tap running in the middle of a cane field, never bother to turn it off, you see. So that gives you a clue as to how dumb Marxists can be, not understanding human nature, that you've really got to make people pay for things so they care about them, look after them and maintain them. But Marxism was meant to be a strike against evil capitalism. They always think capitalism is terrible, but ownership of things has useful value in protecting infrastructure. It's an interesting thing that they discovered. So when Fidel Castro died, who was one of the worst dictators we've ever had, although he had the lowest body count of all the dictators, only a few 100,000. It wasn't 70 million like China, but not as much as, say, Stalin, that sort of thing. But still, on the scale of communist dictators, he was pretty ruthless with his own people. And so it's when he dies, it's a welcome opportunity to see how all the left-wing Marxists all around the world, like Justin Trudeau, and start making glowing eulogies about him. What a great man he was, and left his mark on history, and a man to be remembered, and a man of virtue, and that sort of thing. And that really shows the true. It's a look inside the head of all these stupid bloody Democrats who are really Marxists. All they ever want to do is destroy their own nations and turn them into a concentration camp, like Fidel Castro did with his own country. Did you know that in Castro's Cuba, native Cubans were not allowed to run a business, not allowed to open a business, because that was evil capitalism. Only foreigners were allowed to run shops and businesses. Can you believe that? In your own country, you can't run a business because of the political ethos of the Marxist dictator. Now, that's where you're headed with people like Justin Trudeau, who's just been telling Canadians in a frightening sort of way, an ominous a picture of the future is being painted. You Canadians have no culture. You're all going to be replaced, and Canada, this is how pie in the sky Justin Trudeau is. He's only a drama teacher at school, that's all he's ever been. He wants Canada to have a population of 100 million people. Now, you can't really do that because most of Canada is uninhabitable and they live between the border and a large mountainous region on a thin strip going across Canada, you see. So where are you going to put 100 million people to bury Canadians in? I don't know. It just cannot be done. But it just shows how pie in the sky, disconnected from reality, yet ruthless and cruel that he is. And it would seem that Justin Trudeau is a wannabe Fidel Castro. In fact, most Democrats seem to be wannabe Fidel Castros, ruthless dictators working toward that goal of lording it over everybody, practicing the art of tyranny because it makes them feel good. Hence the recent sort of thoughtful pronouncements about the fact that really Democrats, left-wing thinking people, are actually satanic in nature because all they ever want to do is bring tyranny down upon everybody and make life hell for everybody and leave themselves as the controlling elite. So they're all wannabe Fidel Castros running the whole world like a concentration camp, like Russian gulags, the Chinese gulag, etc. So the recent death of Fidel Castro, you can go around the world, look it up on the net, how many leftist people said he was a wonderful human being, that sort of thing, and left his mark on history, and he must be admired, and isn't he a wonderful person? Well, he never did much for Cuba. He brought the world close to thermonuclear war. That's total annihilation. How do you score that on a test card? How do you score that he would risk destroying the entire planet because of Marxism? I mean, for goodness sake. Yet so many people want to emulate him and admire him and celebrate his life like it was something wonderful to the human race, when it was extremely detrimental as far as I can tell. Most dictators are like that. And the usual thing is trotted out about the dictator that they used to say they made the trains run on time and they cleared out organised crime or something like that. Well, about Castro, they found something good. He had a lovely health service. You could get a heart transplant for free. That was really good, right? So the fact that millions of people voted with their feet and left his Marxist fairyland tells you what they really thought of it and how they've probably all got much better lives in America now. Breaking news about Donald Trump and what he's doing even before he's put into office. He's showing some smarts, and it sounds like he's using his homegrown business skills and getting some good advice. Apparently, he has secured the services of Blackwater, the mercenary company, which consists of former US military people re-enlisted in a private corporation. The advantage being you don't have to report body counts when they get killed, and it allows the US government to lie about the number of US combat troops in a particular place. Now, the owner of Blackwater sold his business to somebody else, and then he reacquired an army somehow, and he's now based in Qatar. So it sounds like the Qataris actually bought out the owner of Blackwater, and is going to come back with a different name. But this is a private army that Donald Trump seems to want to have up his sleeve in case he's got any problems with state governments. Anyone wants to start a revolution using UN vehicles, that sort of thing. He's got his own private army, which is outside the regulations. In theory, the federal forces can't be used against the American people, but there's been a fusion program where federal forces can fuse locally with state forces, and you end up with a local sheriff with a 30-ton armoured car with 30 calibre machine guns on the roof. The American police forces have been militarised dramatically, and that's a serious pocket of resistance that may need to be stared down. I hope that's all that has to be done, because there's a huge problem coming, the defiance of these so many sanctuary cities like Chicago. By the way, Rahm Emanuel is currently the mayor. He's going to go to jail, right? He ran a private email server himself when he was in the White House, and he's now the mayor of Chicago, and he's saying, damn you, I'm not going to let one illegal migrant go. So he's basically committing treason, as far as I can tell, against the federal government. The federal government have said they're going to cut off $1 billion annual allocations of funds to those cities, but that will plunge those cities into a high level of chaos and probably promote more street crime. I think the problem is to arrest the ringleaders from the sheriff, the police chief, the mayor, right up to the state governors if they don't enforce the laws about immigration. They've just been allowed to be unenforced for the last 30 years and got America in a right pickle. And the wall can't be built quick enough, and the train on top sounds wonderful, but I suspect that will take 15 years to complete. And the quickest way to solve the immigration problem is simply to enforce the law as it stands. And FEMA camps might be a good place to move these migrants to, these illegals. And also you put the city officials in who have been harbouring them for 15 or 20 years and boasting about it on social media. I hope Donald Trump does enforce the law as it stands, because it will make America a much better place and take it back to a much better way of living that they had 30 odd years ago. There's been a long-term detailed investigation into the birth certificate of Barack Obama, and the only reason he's held it all off, he's got a totally corrupted Attorney General's department and string of judges right down to local courts. Some of the cases brought against Barack Obama, the genuineness of his birth certificate, have been thrown out on the grounds that it's such an obviously silly, fraudulent, incompetent fraud that it's not even worth admitting as evidence in a court case, so therefore he will remain president. Bang, case closed. That's actually the reasoning used in one court case to keep Obama in power. So that judge was obviously compromised. I'm afraid to say the whole justice system seems to be compromised via pedophilia, like so much of the people involved in Pizzagate. The whole US government seems to be run by pedophiles under blackmail, doing what they're told by what seems to be the so-called deep state, the people behind the government that pull invisible strings to make politicians do some very strange things. But Pizzagate is going to unravel. There's about 200 to 300 people to be jailed, according to an informal statement by a congressman recently in a YouTube video. And there's congressional inquiries ongoing that have been going for a long, long time that are going to put a lot of people in prison, regardless of what Mr. Trump does or says. I'm sure he won't want to pardon these people. It might be good to put new blood in there to replace them anyway. But it's certainly going to expose and produce a kind of map of how far corruption has gone. In fact, it looks like organised crime involving pedophilia has completely hollowed out the US government right down to local judge level in some states. So it could be a remarkable improvement in the health of the US government if you just take out all the infected parts of the government, which could be several hundreds of people. We can look forward to this, and I must say that watching this every day, I'm glued to my screen. And I must say, because there's more information available, it's more exciting than the collapse of the Soviet Empire. But this seems to be the rising of a new empire, an empire going back to health with the right sort of leadership in Donald Trump, I'm very pleased to say. And the zaniness and political hilarity of the American system still assails us. We go from ridiculous to absurd to sublime sometimes, and then back to downright stupid. We've got Jill Stein, who was irrelevant to begin with, presidential candidate, claiming she wants recounts everywhere. She's raised $7 million in payments because in America with 300 million people, no matter what issue's going, whatever issue's called out, some people's emotional buttons are pushed and money is sent. Anyway, she's got $7 million for doing 3 recounts, which it is known she couldn't possibly win, couldn't possibly do. In one of the states, she would have needed to drum up 30,000 complaints, of which there wasn't a single one in that state. Michigan's already been won by Donald Trump in the recount. And so she's got $7 million, which is all going to go to the worthy cause of destroying America using the usual Marxist trickery. That's really all Marxism's about, destroying everything. And that's what those emotional people's money is going to go to, the destruction of more America. Okay? Now, just when you think that's a bit silly and quite stupid, and how could anything be more stupid than that? Well, there is several more things. One of them is Michelle Obama, or should I say Michael Obama, the lady with the huge bulging crotch through her dresses. She's announced that she's not going to run for president. She's not going to run for any political office. Can you imagine that? The Republican Party must be angered about that, because she would make an ideal opponent for them, being she's a disbarred lawyer and an uncertified vegetable gardener around the White House. That's basically all she's ever done. Obama actually calls her Michael frequently in speeches. That's been picked up. And so she's she's one of the many fluid genders, apparently, hermaphrodite or transgender or something like that. God knows what. But aren't you glad that she's not going to run for the president's job next time? Now, only more ridiculous than that is the fact that Hillary Clinton's now announced she's going to run again in the year 2020 against Donald Trump. And at the same time, her daughter has just indicated an interest in dementia. She's talked about it on social media. So Chelsea Clinton is concerned about dementia, is showing an interest in it, and her mother's now going for the next presidential election, full steam ahead, it seems. It seems to me that nobody understands that many of these people are going to be in jail. Certainly Chelsea Clinton and Hillary Clinton. 200 or 300 people out of the top of the US government are all going to jail. And this is going to happen regardless of what Mr. Trump says or does, because it's a natural ongoing legal process. People have to be prosecuted where wrongdoing is found. And they've really got to find out how far the corruption goes, because it's important to know to what extent the US government has been completely hollowed out by parasitic organised crime. It is necessary to ascertain accurately where the crime finishes and, for want of a better phrase, goodness begins. Because there seems to be some kind of completely parasitic hollowing out of the US government that's happened with 30 years of organised crime, headed by the Clinton Foundation and the Bushes. So that's about the stupidest thing you've heard for a long time, isn't it? Hillary Clinton still thinking she's going to be around and able to do this while she's going to jail, not knowing that she's likely going to be in jail or at least under house arrest for the rest of her life or something like that. People are screaming for her to be seen in orange overalls in a jail situation, and that's likely to happen. And I think it will be absolutely necessary to satisfy people's sense of justice. Can I put it that way? Sense of justice has to be gratified by the system to show that justice is being done. It's like a public requirement, you see. After 30 years of injustice and corrupt judges and corrupt White House, something's got to be done to clear the air and say, right, we've got a fresh start at least with a new team at the top of the power pyramid in the US. But otherwise, my knees are knocking with what kind of exciting news could come out of US tomorrow. Steve here in Sydney, over and out.